Hey, it's me, Abby P. What up, my people? 여러분 안녕하세요. 한국어 공부 영상 너무 오랜만이죠? 네, 오늘의 주제는 여러분이 주신 한국어에 대한 질문입니다. 제 인스타그램 스토리에서 어떤 한국어 질문이 있으면 저한테 알려주고 나중에 이 Q&A 영상에서 대답할 거라고 했거든요. 지금부터 영어로 할게요. Steps for learning the language. I feel like I also talked about this in my Korean videos. Steps for learning the language. First one, learn Hangul, the Korean alphabet. Next step, build up your vocabulary and grammar. Some people ask, should I be studying vocab first or grammar first? To be honest, you should be studying both at the same time because there's like the basic grammar and then basic vocabularies, because you can't make sentences or do grammar without the vocabulary, and then you can't be able to use the vocabulary that you learned without using it with grammar or like putting it in sentences. So you really have to do both at the same time. I think once you're done with like the basics of the grammar and vocabularies, then you could start doing more things like practicing with dramas or with music, and that's more for like intermediate, I think, because you'll be too overwhelmed if you do all of these things and you don't even have like the basic foundation. Foundation is so important. Start very slowly in the beginning first and then slowly work your way up. How to know what to learn next. If you have a workbook, then that's a lot easier because you can just go to the next section and then the next section. So definitely get a workbook or like some curriculum to follow if you don't or haven't tried already, because that will really help you in what I've learned, what I need to learn next. So get a curriculum, get a workbook. Any tips or tricks on memorizing the alphabets? For me, there wasn't really any tips or tricks. Literally just learn the characters, learn how to say them, and then just like do it over and over again. It was repetition for me, whether it's with flashcards or writing the characters over and over again, or having like a friend or somebody quiz you with the flashcards or like with the characters. It was just that. There wasn't really any tricks. It's just repetition and constant practice. Tips to memorize the Korean words easily. Repetition and hard work. Write them over and over again. I think if you just like learn to associate with things or make like some funny ways to help you remember a word, what I think really helps is putting those words into a context. Then it'll help you remember it because you're actually like using it within a context. And then also, yeah, like writing that word over and over again in a practice sentence with a context. Being here in Korea, it's definitely a lot easier when you like learn a word and then you hear it and you're like, oh, I learned that word, I know it. And then you hear it again and again and you're like, okay, now that word and its meaning is ingrained in my mind because I'm constantly hearing it. If you're not in Korea or you're not around the native Korean language, then write it over and over again in different sentences. That way you have a context for what that word is and where and when it can be used. How do I learn the pronunciation correctly? How can I correct myself if I do something wrong? To learn pronunciation correctly, go watch my pronunciation tips video, pronunciation for beginners video. So there's that. You can watch that one first if you haven't already. Honestly, it's a lot of just listening and imitating. That's what I said in one of my other language videos, is I just listen to things over and over again and imitate it. A thing that really helped me a lot actually with Korean pronunciation and like with pronouncing any language is music. I really listen to a bunch of songs that I like in the language and I just imitate how that sounds and I just do it over and over again, and I feel like that really helped with my pronunciation. Another good example of that is if you know Jungkook from BTS, of course. He's not known for being like one of the better English speakers in the group compared to like RM, but when he does speak English, he has very good pronunciation. In my opinion, I really feel like it's because he does a lot of English covers and he loves to sing English pop songs and stuff like that. Even though he may not be like as fluent in the language, he's so good at just like listening and imitating how those English words are pronounced and then doing it that exact same way.
Feeling like I'm breathing my last breath. Feeling like I'm walking my last steps. Should've known your love is okay. No, I can't get you out of my brain. Oh, it's such a shame. We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore.
We went to Disneyland 2 years ago, I remember Buzz Lightyear to infinity and beyond.
And again, like I said, just a lot of repetition. Just listening a lot to native Korean and then just imitating it, listening to it over and over again, imitating it, recording yourself, making those sounds, listening back to it, doing it over and over and over again until your sound and that sound that you're trying to imitate matches. That's what I did a lot. So that's my tip for you guys in terms of pronunciation. I just slapped my thigh. I hope that wasn't too loud. Is it possible to become close to fluent without living in South Korea or having speaking partners? Yes, I think it is definitely possible because I've seen people in real life that I know and here on YouTube. Like, how did you balance your time learning Korean plus working as a teacher? I think this question would help too because, you know, a lot of us are also trying to learn languages and balance our lives as students or teachers or whatever we do. How do I balance my time? I just do it. I don't know. Just like stay organized. That's my key to like being able to do everything that I want to do. Have a notebook or like a planner and organize your study time. Organize your, I don't know, play time, your exercise time. Keep organized. Keep a schedule for yourself and follow it. Stick to it. What are the 5 Korean speech levels? Korean speech levels. Oh my gosh. I feel like I have to make a video on that. There's 5 of them? There are? Okay. 를, 을, 는, 은. When to use 은, 는, 이, 가. 은, 는, 이, 가. So many questions for this. How to use 을, 을, 이, 가. I feel like I'm gonna have to make a separate video to further explain these markers. Okay, so to put it simply, 을 and 를 are your object markers. So if you have knowledge in like say Japanese, it's similar to the wo. So you're essentially putting this next to the object in the sentence. So for example, 밥을 먹어요. The object particle 을 is connected with the object, the 밥, the meal. And then depending on if it ends with a vowel or a consonant or like a 받침, then you would do the 을 or 를 accordingly. So in the case if something ends in a vowel like I play volleyball, 배구를 해요. 배구를 하다. You basically just connect it with the object and then change it to 을 or 를 based on if it ends with a consonant or a vowel. And then 이 and ka are your subject markers. And sometimes it gets confusing with 은 and 는, which are your topic markers. When you use 이 and ka, it's more for, I'd say like emphasis on who the subject is. So for example, taking attendance, you know, and the teacher's trying to figure out who John is. John이 누가 John이에요? Like who's John? Then you wouldn't be like 저는 John이에요. 저는, you wouldn't say that. You would say 제가, I'm John. You know, it's like you're emphasizing. Or for example, like at home here with my cats, like if I see some toilet paper that's been chewed up, I'd be like 누가? Like who did this? Luna did it. Not 루나는 했어. You'd be like 루나가 했어. Luna did it. It was her. So you're like emphasizing. And then again, 이 and ka, you would use either depending on if it ends in a vowel or a consonant. Luna, ka, 이. And then 은, like I said, is just your topic markers. It can be confused with like the subject, but in terms of Korean, it is your topic marker. If you're introducing yourself, you would say 저는 애비입니다. 저는 my name입니다. 이에요. You wouldn't say like 제가 애비입니다 because that you'd be emphasizing like I'm Abby, but you're not. You're just like introducing yourself to other people. So 저는 애비입니다. I feel like since this question came up by a number of people, I'll probably make a video on this specifically. I know a lot of you guys were asking about like a lot of grammar questions. Oh, excuse me. Differences in conjugations, like whether to end sentences with 요, 니다, I think like 입니다, 이다, or 까, 입니까, like that. Well, 까, 입니까, 씁니까, that's a question, first of all. But it's essentially the same form as like 니다 or 씁니다. I'd say, honestly, like you'll be fine getting around talking to Koreans or in Korea if you just end things in 요. 씁니다, 씁니까, 입니까 is very like you use that form, you hear that form more on like official things like the news, very formal events. You would hear it 입니다. So you wouldn't really use that in like normal everyday language. You would just end things in 요. So that's just a tip there. Is 차 always used for going somewhere, like 가자. 차 is the informal, casual way. It's essentially like let's do something, let's do blah blah. So 가자, you take the 가다, remove the 타, add the 차. 가자, let's go. For example, let's do it, let's do it. 하다, remove the 타, add the 차. 하자. Let's eat, 먹. 다, remove the 타, add the 차, 먹자. So it's let's do whatever the verb is. When do you use the dictionary forms of verbs like 많다 or 하다 in conversation? You would see that a lot in novels or written forms of things. So like if, for example, you see news articles online, like on Naver or wherever, you do see things written in that form. 많다, 한다. It's just stating something. And then I feel like in conversation, also like as if you're stating something, you're just like stating something like to yourself. So for example, if I'm like in the Seoul subway and there's hella people, I'd be like, wow, 사람이 엄청 많다. Like there's so many people, what the F, you know? Like I feel like I'm just stating it to myself. It's very like casual. Oh, so many questions. What? Is it hard to find a job in Korea? That has nothing to do with Korean. Okay. Is there a way to tell the difference between and I always get them mixed up. Is there any way to pronounce and different? I pronounce them the same and I don't know if it's correct. To be honest, like you don't have to worry about the difference between the and the too much when you're speaking it, because even to Koreans, the difference is so slight. There is like a very, very small difference, but like no one's gonna care. Just pronounce both of them the same. The only thing you want to worry about really is when you write the character, make sure you're spelling the correct energy. You know, you would use this energy and not that energy. Do we use 부터 for time or just for time expressions such as 지금, 어제, 지금부터, 어제부터? Yeah, 부터 is used more commonly for time. It can be used interchangeably with 에서. So 에서부터, like from somewhere, some time to some other place or some other time. 까지. Yeah. So 에서까지, 부터까지. In, you know, natural Korean, I think most would agree that 부터 is used more commonly with time-related things, time-related words. I always confuse using 방금 and 금방, how to differentiate them. So 방금 means like you just did something, like I just came home. 방금 집에 왔어. And then 금방 is like you're about to do something. I'm about to go. 금방 갈게요. Like that. What's the difference between 사용하다 and 이용하다? That's a really good question actually, because when I first read this I was like, what is the difference between 사용하다 and 이용하다? But essentially, here's what I found. So 사용하다 is more for like things or like tools, like you're using a pen. 펜을 사용해요. 이용하다 is more for services or like resources or something. How to ask for trash bags and how to ask to top up T-money card at a convenience store. Very good question. You know, I should probably make like, I was thinking about this, I should make everyday phrases for living or like getting by in Korea. Let me know if you guys would like that video. So how to ask for trash bags. 쓰레기 봉투 is trash bag. And then as with anything, if you want something in Korean, 주세요, please. So 쓰레기 봉투 주세요. Or 혹시 쓰레기 봉투 있나요? Like, do you have 쓰레기 봉투? The T-money card one is also very simple. All you do is just hand them your T-money card and say 충전해 주세요. 충전해 주세요. 충전해 주세요. Charge it please. 안녕하세요 언니, 질문 있어요. 이 문제는 맞아요? 제 눈이 높아서 매일 제가 늘어야 돼요. 감사합니다. So 제 눈이 높다? I believe that's a Korean expression. Like my standards are high. 제 눈이 높아서 매일 제가 늘어야 돼요. I feel like grammatically that sentence is correct, but to say it more naturally, you could probably change it a bit. 늘어야 돼요. Based on what I'm assuming you're trying to say, 제 눈이 높아서 매일 열심히 해야 돼요. 열심히 해요. 열심히 할게요. Like that, maybe. You want to improve yourself or get better, right? Every day because your standards are high. If that's what you're trying to say. How would you know that you're progressing in learning 한국어? That's a really good question. I think you can always tell when you're progressing in the language because you go from not being able, as a beginner, you go from not being able to read Korean to knowing how to read Korean because you learn the alphabet and you practice, going from not knowing how to construct sentences to being able to say things and, you know, create your thoughts in the language. So this just came to my mind. I think a good way to know that you're progressing in Korean is to make a list of goals for yourself. So first, you know, very basic, starting off, learn how to read Hangul. And then once you finish that goal, you cross it off, and that's how you know you're progressing. Next goal, learn how to construct basic sentences. If you can do that, cross that off. There's another thing that you've progressed in, going more into like intermediate advanced levels, being able to converse fluently with other Koreans on a day-to-day basis. You know, that's how I know I progressed in Korean since living here for several years now. I'm on my 5th year now living here, you know, and I'm able to converse with everyone that I encounter here in Korea, and I'm able to express what I want to do or what I want, like at a store or wherever I'm at. And I couldn't do that when I first got here. So that's how I know I progressed. You know, making goals for yourself and then like just keeping track where you came from, where you're at now, and just everything in between. How do you overcome the anxiety or fear when conversing with another person in Korean? Very, very good question also. Language anxiety is a very, very real thing. When I was a student in school, I had very, very big language anxiety. But I think like as I got older, you just do it because you have to do it in order to improve it in the language. Like you really, it's a challenge in itself to like overcome that anxiety. And it takes time, you know, it takes time. Like don't push yourself too hard. If you made that goal to like talk to that Korean market owner one day and you couldn't do it because you were like too nervous, it's fine. Like do it the next day or do it the next time you go. If you fail that, then do it the next time you go. You know, like take it easy. Also, everyone is different, so you gotta do things like on your own time. But yeah, like my first year, like I said, I was so scared to talk in Korean to other Koreans or even like hear Korean from other Koreans, like really freaked me out. But yeah, it just takes time, and I think also you need to build that confidence, and in order to build that confidence you need to build more of your knowledge in that language and making sure that in between you're also using it to some extent, because if you're constantly building this knowledge and you're not even really using it, then that also creates more anxiety. Make sure you're learning to build that confidence but also using it to release that anxiety. And I think the more that you do it, the more time goes and the more you get comfortable, then it becomes easier. 여러분 어때요? 이 영상이 여러분에게 도움이 됐으면 좋겠네요. 혹시 다른 질문 있으면 아래에 댓글 남기고 꼭 좋아요와 구독 잊지 마세요. 다음 달은 일본어 공부 집중하려고 합니다. 네, 기대해주세요. 바이!